I met Ethan in Austin, the kind of city where everybody's always starting over. He was funny in a calm way, like he didn't need to prove anything. We started with coffee after work, then weekend tacos, then meeting each other's friends like it was nothing. I remember thinking, this is easy. Not perfect, just easy. We talked about having a family like it was something you order and it arrives when you're ready. When he proposed, we were sitting on the floor of our apartment, eating takeout and watching some random show. No big speech. Just him, nervous, asking if I'd do life with him. I said yes so fast it almost felt like I didn't breathe. My Aunt Nora called me the next morning, and I could tell she already knew. Nora's the type who can sound proud and worried in the same sentence. She's a family lawyer in Dallas. She asked how I was feeling, then she went quiet for a second and said, "Okay. Are you getting a prenup?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt like she dropped something cold into a warm room. I told her no. I told her I trusted him. I said I didn't want to start a marriage by planning for the end. Nora didn't argue like people do in movies. She just asked questions, calm and sharp. What was Ethan's family like? Did they have money? Did they own property? Did anyone manage anything for him? I told her his mom, Lorraine, was involved, but in a sweet way. I said she was just protective. Nora didn't buy it, but she didn't push hard. She said, "I'm not trying to ruin your happiness. I'm trying to protect your future self." The wedding was in a small venue outside Round Rock, all fairy lights and simple flowers, the kind of thing you see on Pinterest when you're tired at night. Lorraine hugged me for a long time like she was already claiming me, and she kept calling me, "sweet girl." Ethan looked at me like I was the only person in the room. I remember the vows and the music and that feeling like everything made sense. If anyone had told me that same warmth would be used like a weapon later, I would have called them bitter. I honestly thought I was stepping into a family, not into a plan. We moved into a little house we rented at first, then later we bought something modest, nothing fancy, just a place with a backyard and a garage full of stuff we didn't need. I worked, Ethan worked, we built routines. Lorraine came by a lot, always with a smile, always with a reason. Cookies. A tool Ethan needed. A bag of baby clothes from a friend because, yes, she was already talking grandkids like it was a schedule. When I got pregnant the first time, I called Nora and cried on the phone because I was scared and happy at the same time. She told me to breathe, told me to write things down, to keep copies of paperwork. I teased her, told her she could relax, that not everything was a lawsuit. She didn't laugh back. She just said, "Promise me you won't let anybody push you out of your own life." I promised, easy, because I didn't understand what that sentence could really mean yet. Lorraine was the kind of woman people compliment without thinking. Nice hair, nice nails, polite voice. At first I liked her. She brought meals after the baby was born and cleaned the kitchen while I sat there half asleep with milk on my shirt. She'd say things like, "You're doing amazing," and I wanted to believe it. But she also had this habit of taking over without asking. Not loudly. It was more like she'd slide into the driver's seat and act like it was always her place. If the baby cried, she'd reach first. If I said I was trying a schedule, she'd smile and say, "Oh honey, that never works," like my ideas were cute but temporary. When Ethan got home from work, she'd start talking before I could. She'd update him like she was the co-parent. After our second child, Lily, things got heavier. 2 kids changes the air in a house. You're always behind. Dishes, laundry, bills, sleep. Lorraine showed up more. She'd say it was because she wanted to help, and part of me was grateful. She watched the kids so I could shower. She did grocery runs. She would fold laundry while she talked about how hard motherhood is, like she was remembering her own sacrifices. Then little comments started slipping in, like tiny needles you don't feel until later. She'd tell Ethan, right in front of me, she's been so tired lately, I worry about her. Or she'd say, I know she loves the kids, but she gets overwhelmed. She'd say it sweetly, like concern, and I'd feel my face heat up. I'd try to laugh it off. Ethan would shrug, not wanting conflict. He'd say, Mom, she's fine, but he didn't sound sure. He sounded like a guy trying to keep peace. The thing is, Lorraine was always calm. So if I got upset, I looked like the dramatic one. If I snapped, even just a little, she'd go quiet and do that polite smile like she was being patient with me. After a while, I started second-guessing myself. I'd hear her voice in my head when I made choices. I'd think, is this wrong? Am I making it worse? It sounds small, but it adds up. You start shrinking without noticing. She also loved documenting things. Photos, videos, little memories. At first it was normal, grandma stuff. But she'd film moments that didn't feel cute. Like me trying to calm the kids when they were both screaming. Or Lily refusing dinner while I begged her to take one bite. Lorraine would say, I just want to remember this stage, and I'd be too tired to argue. Sometimes she'd offer to handle doctor appointments since Ethan's so busy. She'd say she'd keep everything organized. She'd be the one holding papers, writing notes, putting things in folders. Nora came to visit one weekend and watched Lorraine interact with us. She pulled me aside while the kids napped and asked, does she always talk to Ethan like you're not in the room? I started defending it automatically. I said Lorraine meant well. I said she was just involved. Nora didn't say, I told you so. She just said, people who mean well still can do damage. Then she looked at me and asked, are you keeping your own copies of things? I said I didn't need to. And Nora's face changed just a little, like she was seeing a crack that wasn't there before. By the time I noticed how far Lorraine had inserted herself into our life, it felt normal. She'd pick up the kids from daycare sometimes. She knew our passcode for the alarm. She had a key. She had opinions about what Lily should wear, what Noah should eat, what time they should go to bed. I told myself it was family. I told myself I was lucky. I didn't see that she was slowly positioning herself as the stable one in the story, and me as the messy background character. The marriage didn't blow up in one night. It kind of leaked out. Ethan started coming home later. Not suspicious, just distant. He'd sit with his phone and nod when I talked. He'd say he was tired, he'd say work was stressful. We stopped laughing the way we used to. We started negotiating instead of talking, who's doing daycare, who's buying groceries, who forgot the pediatrician appointment. Lorraine became the place Ethan went for comfort, and I could feel it. If we disagreed, he'd call her, just to vent. Then he'd come back with her phrases in his mouth like they were his. He'd say things like, maybe you should manage your emotions better, which didn't sound like him. He'd say, Mom thinks the kids need more structure, as if I wasn't the one living in the chaos all day. Every time he said, Mom thinks, I felt smaller. Like my opinion needed approval. One night we fought about something stupid, money, of course. Ethan told me we were tight and we needed to cut back. I asked him to show me the numbers, because I was the one skipping little things for myself while he still had his hobbies. He got defensive and said I didn't trust him. I told him trust isn't the same as blindness. He stared at me like I'd insulted him. The next morning, Lorraine showed up with pastries like it was a normal Saturday, and she looked at me with this calm pity that made my skin crawl. The separation talk happened in the kitchen, under that harsh light you never notice until your life changes. Ethan said, I think we need space. He didn't cry. He sounded like he'd rehearsed it. I asked him if he loved me. He hesitated, just for a second, and that second felt like a door closing. I said we could try counseling. He said he didn't think it would work. And I already knew, in my gut, that Lorraine had been preparing him for this. Like she'd been painting a picture of me as the problem until he could only see that. What I expected was heartbreak, maybe loneliness. What I didn't expect was strategy. Within a week, Ethan had spoken to a lawyer. He told me it was just to understand options, but the language he used wasn't his. He started using words like custodial schedule and a financial responsibility. He asked me questions like he was gathering information, not trying to solve a marriage. I felt like I was talking to someone wearing my husband's face. Then Lorraine stopped pretending. She invited Ethan and the kids to her house so they could have stability. She called me to tell me, not to ask. She said it like a decision that had already been made. When I got upset, she stayed calm and said, "This is what's best for them right now. You're overwhelmed. You need rest." Rest. Like I was a broken thing they were putting away. Soon I started hearing things from other people, little rumors that didn't make sense. A neighbor asked if I was doing okay, because she'd heard the kids worked with grandma a lot lately. A mom from daycare gave me a weird look when I arrived late one morning, like she'd already formed an opinion. The daycare office told me there was a new approved pickup list, and Lorraine's name was highlighted like it was priority. I asked who changed it. They said Ethan had updated it. I felt my stomach drop. I asked Ethan why he was doing things without talking to me. He said he was trying to keep things smooth. He said I was reactive, and he didn't want the kids to see conflict. He made it sound like I was the danger. Like my feelings were a problem that needed managing. When I called Nora, my voice shook so hard I could barely get words out. She listened, and then she asked me one question that made my chest tighten. "Do you feel like they're building a case?" Because that's what it felt like. Small moves, quiet changes, paperwork adjustments, people being told a story before I could even speak. And the worst part was how normal Lorraine acted through all of it. Like she was doing a favor. Like she was the hero. I started looking back at the last few years, replaying moments that once seemed harmless. The videos. The folders. The concern. The way she always made sure there were witnesses when I was tired or stressed. By the time Ethan officially moved out, it didn't feel like a breakup. It felt like I'd been slowly replaced in my own family, one polite step at a time. At some point, confusion turns into clarity, and that clarity hurts more than not knowing. I started asking questions I should have asked years earlier. I looked at bank statements more closely. I asked for documents. I noticed how often Ethan said, "I'll take care of it," and how rarely I actually saw anything in my own name. The truth showed up slowly, like bad light in a room you thought was safe. We never had a prenup, and I finally understood what that really meant. The house we lived in wasn't truly mine. Some savings I thought we shared had been managed through accounts connected to his mother. Things I helped build, plan, and sacrifice for were legally floating just out of my reach. When I asked Ethan directly, he said, "That's just how Mom set it up." It made sense at the time. At the time. Not for me. Never for me. But money wasn't the part that scared me the most. It was the kids. One afternoon, I found emails printed out and left on the counter by mistake. Messages between Ethan and Lorraine. Conversations about stability, environment, and concerns. My name was there, but it didn't sound like me. It sounded like a character they had created, someone unreliable, emotional, always struggling. Someone who needed supervision. That's when it clicked. Lorraine hadn't been helping. She'd been collecting. Every moment I cried. Every time the house was messy. Every text where I said I was tired or overwhelmed. She'd framed normal motherhood as evidence. I remembered the videos, the notes, the appointments she insisted on handling. This wasn't chaos after the marriage failed. This was preparation long before it did. I felt sick realizing how patient she'd been. How calm. How she waited for the right moment, letting the pressure build until I looked exactly like the version of me she wanted others to see. And the worst part was knowing that if I reacted too strongly now, it would only prove her point. That night, I sat alone in the living room after the kids were asleep and cried without making a sound. Not because I was weak, but because I finally understood the game I was in. And I hadn't agreed to play. Calling Nora again felt different this time. I wasn't defensive anymore. I wasn't trying to protect my pride. I told her everything. I told her I was scared. I told her I felt stupid. She didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, she said, "Okay. Now we move." Meeting with her in person was grounding. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She told me the situation was serious, but not hopeless. She explained how narratives work in court, how silence can be mistaken for guilt, how calm manipulation often looks more believable than emotional truth. It hurt hearing my life broken down into legal risks, but it also gave me something solid to hold on to. The courtroom was nothing like TV. No drama, no shouting. Just people talking about my children like they were items on a list. Lorraine sat there looking composed, hands folded, eyes soft. Ethan avoided looking at me. When they spoke about me, they used phrases like emotional instability and lack of consistency. I wanted to stand up and scream that loving your kids while being exhausted isn't a crime. But Nora squeezed my arm and reminded me to breathe. Piece by piece, we started pushing back. We showed patterns. We questioned timelines. We pointed out how information was filtered through Lorraine before it ever reached anyone else. We showed how involved I had always been, even when I was tired, even when I struggled. I stopped apologizing for being human. I stopped trying to be perfect. I focused on being honest. There were days I went home feeling hollow. Days I doubted myself again. Days I missed my kids so badly my chest physically hurt. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered how quietly they tried to erase me. And I refused to disappear from my own story. I don't tell this story. Why? Because I won in some dramatic way. I tell it because I survived it with my sense of self intact. I lost things, money, time, the version of marriage I thought I had. I lost trust in places I never thought I'd have to question. But I didn't lose my voice. I learned that love doesn't cancel out power, and family doesn't always mean safety. I learned that ignoring red flags doesn't make you kind, it makes you vulnerable. I stopped blaming the woman I was back then. She loved deeply. She believed people when they smiled at her. That wasn't stupidity. It was hope without armor. Today, I don't confuse peace with silence anymore. I ask questions. I keep copies. I trust my instincts even when they're uncomfortable. I teach my children that love should never cost you your place in your own life. If there's one thing I know for sure now, it's this: what was taken from me once will never be taken again. Not quietly. Not politely. And never without my consent.